All right. Hi, everybody. It's Kathleen Driskell here. I'm the chair of the School of Writing, and I just want to say how delighted I am that we have all of these wonderful faculty members who have agreed to come in and read for us this evening. This is the second Spalding Presents session that we've offered to you all. It's a nice way for us all to be together in these kind of crazy times right now, these unsafe times. So thanks for popping in. Tonight, we're going to hear from 4 faculty members. We're going to hear from poet Douglas Manuel. We're going to hear from poet Lynnell Edwards. We're going to hear from Fenton Johnson, who writes in fiction and also creative nonfiction. Most of you all know this. And then we'll also hear from Elaine Orr, who, like Fenton, writes in creative nonfiction and also fiction. So again, we're delighted that you're here. I want to say a few things to you all before we get started this evening. We're glad that we can be with you virtually. We'll take anything we can get right now. So great to be together. So I want to let you know that I just pushed send on a letter to students telling you some things about the fall. And we have some really exciting things that are going to be happening for you. The fall residency is November 13th through the 22nd. We're all hoping against hopes that we can be together, that we can be face-to-face with each other, but we're pretty sure that we're going to have some sort of hybrid option for you as well, which means if you have health concerns or there are health concerns in your family, or even if there's some state quarantines that prevent you from coming to residency, we'll be able to have a virtual option for you. And that will take place much like the virtual option took place in the spring, which was more wonderful than we could ever have imagined. And we thank everybody for being so generous in participating with that too. So the thing that I'm really excited about is no matter how residency comes together, we found a way to offer you all, the students, traditional workshops, just like you always have, the workshop where you present your worksheet and you have an hour of critique on your own work, an hour of discussion on that. We're going to have small workshops that will allow us to give you a second workshop experience in the fall. And we asked faculty to come up with all sorts of wonderful ideas, exciting ideas for you all. And we're offering over 20 special topics workshops that are all generative, and they take place over 3 days. And so you'll have a 4-day workshop that's traditional, and then you'll move into this 3-day workshop. So I want to say to those of you who are alums here that those 3-day workshops, they're all going to take place virtually. And so they're going to be available to you also during Spalding Con. It's just remarkable. Douglas is reading here tonight. He has a workshop that's called Poetry of Witness in the Time of COVID-19 and Black Lives Matter. Nancy McCabe has one called Playing with Story Structure. Leah Henderson has Emotion, the central puzzle piece of the story. There are hybrid forms that you'll be playing with in these generative workshops. There are workshops on teaching in alternative settings, such as foster home situations and things. So it's just going to be fantastic. So I'm very excited. And I think it's going to be a way for us to maybe to come back together and sort of reignite our creative writing lives, if that's been a problem for some of you. I know it's been a problem for me. So also after these readings tonight, what we're going to do is bring everybody back together and the readers and kind of talk a little bit about how they're managing their writing lives. We did this last week or a couple of weeks ago with our first reading, and it was really encouraging to me, and I want you all to have that same kind of support. So before I start introducing our readers tonight, I want to also say that the Spalding alumni, the MFA Association, is having, they're starting a series of readings. They're calling them the Fourth Friday readings, and they plan on having a lot of them. And their first reading is going to be this Friday at 7 p.m. to 8:15 p.m. and it's going to feature alums who have recently had new work published. So that's always an exciting and encouraging time for all of us. So Christina Trefani-Scott, who's a fiction grad, 2009, Leah Henderson, who's a Writing for Children and YA grad, 2011, and Barbara Sable, who's a poetry grad. They're all going to be featured that evening. And we'll send you that information in a follow-up link that we'll send out to all of you. And then I also wanted to say that at the very end of the readings here, I'll stick around in the virtual platform if you want, and you all can ask me questions about Spalding Con or what we're going to do for fall, or if you have any other sort of questions. If we have new admits out there, new students who fall, I'll be glad to get to know you a little bit and to answer any questions that you may have. So if everybody can turn off their microphone except for Doug. Doug needs to leave his on, okay? So let me introduce him. So Douglas Manuel was born in Anderson, Indiana. He received a BA in creative writing from Arizona State University and an MFA from Butler University. And there at Butler, he was the managing editor for Booth, a journal. Doug is currently a Middleton and Dorrance Knife fellow, at the University of Southern California, where he lives right now, and he's pursuing a PhD in literature and creative writing. So in the past, Doug has served as the poetry editor for Gold Line Press, and he was also one of the managing editors for Ricochet Editions. His poems are featured on Poetry Foundation's website, and they've appeared or are going to appear. He has new things coming out in Pleiades, Poetry Northwest, the Los Angeles Review, Rhino, North American Review, and lots of other magazines. We're so proud of him. His first collection of poems came out in 2017 from Red Hen Press, and that collection of poems is called Testify, and it's a wonderfully powerful collection. I'm so impressed with it. It's such a wonderful debut. And it won the IBPA Benjamin Franklin Award for Poetry. And then in 2020, Douglas has received the Dana Gioia Poetry Award. So he's an exciting addition to our poetry faculty. We're so happy to have him speak with us. And so Doug, I'll turn it over to you. Welcome, Doug.
Thank you so much, Kathleen. Thank you for that kind introduction and the kind words about my work. I'm going to push the timer going right now, so I am not that person that goes over. But honestly, Kathleen and I did a book signing together at AWP when my book first came out, and she changed my world after that. And that's the reason why I'm here. So I'm very happy to be here. Thank you so much, Kathleen. So yeah, you guys have heard me read a lot of things. So I'm going to read from my new manuscript. But before we get into that, I would just like to take a moment to dedicate my portion of the reading to Breonna Taylor and to Elijah McClain and to every other Black person slain since 1619. For this, I think what you guys need to know about Trouble Funk is that it kind of in my head functions as a prequel to my text, Testify, my first book. And in that, I'm imagining my parents getting together in the late 70s and early 80s. So my dad was a DJ at that time. So each poem in this manuscript is titled for a song that he liked to spin. So I'll tell you guys the title and tell you who made that song, and then we're gonna jump right in. I think I'm gonna be able to get through 3 of them. If not, I'll get through 2 and get out of it. The timer's going. So yeah, but thank you. You guys could be doing anything. One of the things I always say, kind of ripping off a quote from Jay-Z, you could be anywhere in the world right now, but you're here with me. Really appreciate it. So much respect, dude. Thank you. All right, first one coming out the gate is called Humpin' by the Gap Band, if you guys remember the Gap Band. All right, Humpin'. The crowd was wilding out, lost and caught in the snare of the beat and harmony. More like one body, not many. Damon's brain is running things. 1, 2, 3, 4. Leave your worries at the door. 5, 6, 7, 8. You better make your booty shake. His crown, not of thorns, but beads of sweat, more precious than diamonds. Work it, baby, work it, baby, work it, baby, work it. Work it, baby, work it, baby, work it, baby, work it. The dance floor more sanctuary than club, and he's the priest. When he was an altar boy, his back was always to the crowd. Not now. Now the strobe lights are the whitest thing in the room, and the groove is the only God anyone is praying to. Denise has never loved him more than when he's commanding the dance floor, but now she sees him as she never has before. A man cloaked with that much glory, surrounded by so many, soaring that high in the sound, can only end up alone and back down on the ground. So this next one is entitled Daz by Brick. This is one of those songs that you totally know it if you don't think you know it. Like when I listened to this, I was like, oh, wow, this is what this is? So yeah, Daz. Some mornings, without warning, Damon would wake and declare, I need some air. I need my bare feet on the grass. I need to be anywhere but here, here meaning the city. Mound State Park being the anywhere. Even his dreams have clipped wings, Denise thinks. His anywhere not being able to be more than the outer borders of little old Anderson, Indiana. Black folks seldom went to Mounds, preferring Streety Park with its netless basketball hoops and trash-ridden fences, so different than the immaculate and well-kept trails and grounds of Mounds. Mounds, where the hills were burial sites filled with the stone tools and bones of the Adena people. Mounds, with its blue, black, white, and green ash trees billowing branches too weak to hold bodies, but wiry enough for the switches their mamas used to make them pick and hit them with, always weeping afterwards. Denise thought her mother was so strange, so vain to cry after whooping her backside, until Damon told her about his mama, locking herself in the bedroom all evening after one of his beatings, picnicking, eating red grapes and bologna sandwiches, the ones that Denise makes, under the shade at Camp P, the forgiving grass between their toes. They almost forgot. They better not be caught in this park after dark. Doing really well on time, so it looks like I'm going to be able to read more than just 3, which is really cool to me. Yeah, so one of the most interesting things, I guess I'll do some poetry prattle since time feels so good. One of the most interesting things about this project is my mother died when I was 8, so really getting to kind of use my imagination and kind of figure out who she is and what she would have been like and step into her past from family stories and from just, again, trusting the writing process. The way I write these is I listen to the song on repeat and journal for 30 minutes, and then I go back and call that. And that's kind of been my writing process with this. So one of the big kind of mysteries in our family has always been my mother's father. So I've been able to, because he wasn't around and nobody in the family talks about him. So I've been able to kind of step into those unknown spaces, and it's just really been fecund for me. So you'll see what I mean by this poem. So this one is Mustang Sally, and of course that's by the great Wilson Pickett. Always Denise's daddy was supposed to be coming. This Sunday at 2 p.m., last Saturday at 4:30, the Friday before that, the Tuesday before that, as far back as Denise could remember. Always. There Denise sat on the crumbling front porch steps, a little girl amongst little ruins. The little pink straps of her backpack securely strapped, waiting for her father to come back. Between inspecting big black ants, letting them climb and scale her hands, she would make believe each passing car was her father's. That black Bonneville with the loose and lowered front bumper looking like a swollen lower lip. That Pontiac Firebird with the wide flat hood spread out like the table Denise saw white folks eat at on TV. That Skylark, the color of night after rain clouds sigh and leave the sky. That dusty old gold Pinto rusted around the wheel wells. Denise saw herself in each passenger seat, her daddy driving. Sometimes she had ice cream, Blue Moon, in a cup, not a cone. Denise is accident prone. Sometimes a big brown bag full of penny candy. If her mood was better than fine, Denise envisioned Fun Dip with its white dipstick. She couldn't resist it. The only thing consistent is just Denise and her daddy, with nothing but open road ahead of them, and enough time to make up for every time he left her sitting on that porch until the street lights announced it was dinner time and she needed to go inside. So I'm at the 8:15 mark, my friends. I'm going to read this one, and I think it's actually good to kind of have this one. Some of you who heard me read at the residency might have heard this. I think I might have changed one more thing. But yeah, this will be coming out in the New Orleans Review soon. And I think I changed one thing since then. But yeah, this will be my last one. And I guess all you need to know is the president in question is Ronald Reagan, part of that the speaker talks about in this poem. And part of my mission, I suppose, besides kind of dismissing Clinton's myths of greatness, because of welfare reform and the Crime Act, is also getting rid of, the kind of Reagan myth as well that people like to throw around. If you wore a body like mine and was alive during that time, even if you're a part of the middle class, it was a hurtful time. So yeah, I think that's all you need to know. And this is called Are You Single? And that's a song by Aura. And if you listen to this one, it's none but bass in your face. All right, this is my last one. Thank y'all again. I'm so happy to be a part of this program and so honored to be reading it. We're also blessed that, we're in a position where we can make a living like this, talking on camera, and don't have to, be essential workers who are risking their lives. So I just think we all should be thankful for that. I know I am. Are you single? Released and returned, the hostages invaded each and every news segment. The new president, a former actor, Damon told her, Denise had never heard of the killers or law and order. Spoke with a sparkle that mirrored the glinting glow, ricocheting off Damon's juicy, soaking wet Jerry curl. Denise's matched his and her Jerry curls. Tonight would be theirs, no dance hall, no women surrounding the turntables, no waiting for him to finish working the room, no prying eyes calling to question all of her fashion choices. Tonight would be a fancy dinner, somewhere Black folks don't normally go, somewhere she ain't never been before. She outlines her lips, fills them, smacks them. She's almost tempted to kiss the glass, almost tempted to love herself. Giving her hair one more pat, she's ready, strolls out in her ankle hose, looking for her flats. In front of the TV, she can only see his back, slightly a tremble. When she gets close enough, she can see the tears. What's wrong, she asks. They just left him swinging there, he says. Who, she asks, thinking it was his brother, his uncle, one of his hard-headed cousins. Then the anchor said his name, plain as day, and matter-of-fact like, just like he would warn of rain or overcast day. Michael Donald, son of Bula May and David Donald. Lynched. Thank you guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Doug. That was really wonderful. So our next reader is my partner in crime, one of my partners in crime here in the office of the School of Writing. So Lynnell Edwards' most recent collection of poetry is This Great Green Valley, which just came out from Broadstone Books, 2020, but really just in the last I don't know, a couple of months or so. And this is a beautiful chapbook of documentary poetry that's based on revisionist narratives of Kentucky's pioneer founding in the 18th century. Lynnell has many other books to her name. She has 3 full-length poetry collections, Covet, The Highwayman's Wife, and The Farmer's Daughter, and those have all been published from Red Hen Press. She also has a chapbook called The Kings of Rock and Roll Hotshot, of the Rock and Roll Hot Shop, and this chronicles the work and art of a glass blowing studio and was released by Accents Publishing in 2014. So, as well as many, many poems that have been published, Lynnell's short fiction, book reviews, and essays have appeared in another Chicago magazine, New Madrid, Connecticut Review, Cincinnati Review, and Pleiades, and elsewhere. And so after we hear her read tonight, I want you all to know that, again, we will send the link to her book. If you are interested in purchasing it, we'll send that out in the email that follows up this reading. So welcome, Lynnell. We're so glad to have you and hear your new work.
Thank you. And I got myself unmuted because I put a sticky up here that says it's green. Yes, This Great Green Valley came out May 1st, height of the pandemic. So I've had sort of a stutter start to any kind of launch for that. So it's very exciting to be sharing this for, one of my first readings from the book since it's been out. Looks like that. So yes, the book is a book of documentary poetry, much of the first half of it chronicling Kentucky's pioneer history based on some research I did at a local archives. I'm going to read one poem from the first section that was one of the very early first poems I wrote. I think it sort of sets the tone. And then I'm going to read from the second half of the book, and I'll say a little bit about that. Settlers 2. Wild the minds of men, and green as the sun-charged canopy of trees, their fears of depredation in the savage tribes, betrothed left at home and drinking water. Evening they go into the hollows, the caves carved by cold springs, seek shelter from the beasts, storm cloud and haint. At day, the lilt of their words shock the limestone cliffs, ash stirred into flame boils coffee, chars meat. Then on to disturb, rattle, rattle the cane break, tramp to high ground, hack a clear patch and arm it. The second part of the book takes place in the near past, which is my childhood. I grew up very near the Kentucky River and spent a lot of time on the Kentucky River with my parents when I was very small, boating and water skiing, as did a lot of people in the small town where I lived. So this takes place in the early 70s. To continue with the soundtrack theme, I think we'd be listening to Three Dog Night and Gordon Lightfoot and maybe some Saturday Morning Jackson 5 from the very early 70s. It's called Locking Through, and it's a single poem and runs about the rest of my time. And if you don't know, to lock through on a boat is to go through kind of a water gate that will take you from one pool in the river up over a dam that's been created to tame the river so you can go forward. And the Kentucky River also, if you don't know, runs from the mouth of the Ohio all the way far into the eastern Kentucky Appalachian Mountains. Locking through. Still and flat as summer days, the Kentucky River below Tyrone Bridge fills now beneath its green surface with silt and scree from the Palisades. The Corps no longer dredges this channel, has closed the locks that let barge traffic pass from one pool to the next and lift pleasure crafts through on weekends. Once upon a time, we put our boat in at Tyrone, backing down the narrow strip of county road that disappeared like broken teeth into green water. Steep, uneven, the buckled path was a trick of speed and angle, brakes against the heft of gravity, struggle of slick wheels to launch and not let the trailer wedge between the pavement edge and crumbling bank. My mother guided, slow, slow, good, that's good, until at water's lip, she shoved the nose and muscled the dry stern over the stays. She held the tow rope slack, led the craft like a colt past the shore to deep water, tied it off at the dock, and let the current carry the load. One Saturday, my brother and I sit in the open bow of our Starcraft outboard, brace for the roar and plain, smile into the wind. We bump over boat wakes, wave at friends, cruise past Gilbert's Creek, past the Bluegrass Bridge dredge operations. We stop at Clifton for gas and sandwiches, where my dad makes the long climb from the plank dock. The whole project a hazard of splintered boards, frayed ropes, up moss-slick steps jammed in the steep bank, to a low-roofed shack that houses both man and enterprise, I suppose. We aren't allowed to go, but made to wait, broiling in our life jackets while my dad pays for gas, never listens to our requests for snacks, emerges laughing after the transaction, the joke about green bologna cut with a rusty butcher knife, before telling us to hang on tight as we roar back into the river's deep center channel, flying at full plane. At the swimming spot by the limestone overhang near Clear Creek, we tie up to a slender tree rooted to a rough rock ledge. Fossils stud the shelf, the spirals and scallops of trilobites, nautilus, tiny ancient cephalopods, hieroglyphs that tell the story of what came before. The river roaring high, carving this canyon of steep palisades, the caves where tribal hunters camped, the earth compressed to flint, chipped into blades, arrow points, hammers. The boat rocks on its wakes and drifts toward the bank, then stills. I jump over the side into green relief and exaltation of limbs and breath, this birth into the strange gravity of current, never soon enough. I am mermaid, my hair loosed and living as tall field grass, drifting in the summer air. White hands luminous and slow, parting the water below, open eyes peering into silence, the dark distance. My brother and I take turns launching from the overhang, calling out spins, the name of superheroes, the biggest splash, until coaxed back into the boat, we head to a stretch of sandy beach at the Lock 6 Dam. Summer Saturdays, 8, maybe 10 outboards are nosed and grounded at the shore. A tow rope stretched to a fixed point, rock, branch, nub of limestone over center ring, wreck washed over the dam and pulled to safety. At one end, the high school students scramble up a rock pile, grab the rope, swing out beyond the sandbar, cannonball, half flip, the smack of a trick missed, and then the whoop of laughter, sting of water on singed skin. A shocked skull punches through the surface, upright body slogging toward shore, knees and arms working, then next in line. Boats anchored close to the dam shiver and tip on the roiling surface. Men sink 3, 4 lines taut with lead weights to the deep, where the big catch feed on God knows what comes over the spill, churned up from the bottom. This Saturday we will lock through. We heave off the beach, idle speed, slip into the chamber. I hear the click of the ignition and the engine stills. My dad tosses up the rope to keep the boat from drifting into the spill, and Mother cautions us to sit, not shift our weight. We wonder at the terrible surge of river through the portals, how the depth marks disappear with the waterline, and we rise, the boat rocking on the chopped surface until the roar dims, the water quiets, and then the electric click and hum of the gates hinging open above the dam. River custom requires that on exit maintain no wake speed, and to the boats idling outside the lock waiting their turn, lift a 2-fingered wave from the wheel, look back at how water over the dam becomes intentional and dark before it spills. At the shore, see the danger, riffles around a snag, drift caught in the current, cooler top plastic bag, life jackets saved in a low branch, a trot line, all that would have been damned to the frothing below. And when clear, then you may bring your boat to plane, steer to the center channel toward different docks and people you don't know, past different camps where people wave from their porches, fly a summer flag, cast fishing lines along the banks, past alternate creeks with their own cross currents rippling at the mouth, and the arch of the trees bowing into shadow. The bank terrain will change. The palisades you know give way to pasture or marshy shallows. Stay as long as it's interesting, watch the gas, consider the afternoon light now lower on your shoulders, then turn, that's all. So friend, if you're thinking this day the family in the Starcraft knows trouble, gas line clogged, child flailing without a life jacket, prop bent and turned on a dark stump, that all has been fable or allegory, prodigal, boatman and river, gates, current, rock, then know that it was really like this. Our boat was really called the Starcraft, and we spent summer days snug and certain in a great green valley, blue happiness splashing around us, gift of cool springs and deep water, shaded banks where fish riddled the rock ledges. And these days carried us through, even past what came later, ragged burden of a future rift, our boat moldering under the tarp in the shed, the life jackets dusty and flat, the locks closed, and the river choked with silt. By late, locked through and back to our home dock, the Starcraft floats silently into its slip between Lock 5 and Lock 6. Running lights shine on the rough plank gangway, and the bow nudges a bumper. My brother, slumped in his life vest, startles. I take the rope, reach to figure eight the line around and around the cleat as the last wake splashes against the shore, cicadas ratchet in the summer dark, and further on, the cars on Tyrone Bridge rush toward their own places in the night. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynnell. It was really beautiful. It's such a lovely book and such a wonderful subject matter. And I love the way that you're working back and forth in time in it. So it's something that really appeals to me, I know. So our next reader is Fenton Johnson. And Fenton published in 2020 of March at the Center of All Beauty, Solitude, and the Creative Life. Vinton Johnson's most recent book was selected as a New York Times Book Review editor's pick. He's also the author of 3 novels, most recently The Man Who Loved Birds, and 3 books of literary nonfiction. His memoir, Geography of the Heart, a memoir, received the American Library Association and Lambda Literary Award, while his Keeping Faith, A Skeptic's Journey Among Christian and Buddhist Monks, received the Lambda Literary and Kentucky Literary Awards. Vinton has been featured on Terry Gross's Fresh Air. That was fun to listen to. And he's a regular contributor to Harper's Magazine, which you would know if you are subscribing and you read Harper's Magazine with any regularity. He's had 4 cover essays. And he's not only on our faculty here, which we're thrilled about at the School of Writing, but he's also creative writing professor emeritus at the University of Arizona. So everyone, please welcome Vinton Johnson.
Thank you. Thanks, Kathleen. And a place to start is to say thanks to Kathleen and Lynnell and Jason and Katie and Karen and all of the Spalding people. Lynnell, I invite you to join a very exclusive club, which is composed of writers, authors who have had books that came out in the middle of the COVID epidemic, because I too have yet to speak to a live audience with this book. But it's really great that Spalding is keeping the program going so successfully in the face of all of these challenges, and giving us the opportunities to bring our books to audiences when a lot of the conventional opportunities are shut down. Let's see, what else did I want to say? Oh, you know what I wanted to say, and inspired in part by what Doug said, but I'm up, you know, I'm out and about, I'm around and about. I'm in Tucson now. I was in San Francisco for 2 weeks or so, attending to the death of a close friend, and a few weeks ago. And I'm really proud of the people in Louisville for keeping the issue of Breonna Taylor's death alive. We cannot, must not, should not forget. It's scary to think that if George Floyd had not been killed, we might not even be mentioning her at this point. But it's been so exciting to be out there in Northern California and to see the news stories of people in Louisville on the streets. And so I'm really proud of my home state, which is got some that's great to be able to say. All right, so I like to start every reading, even a short one, with a little invitation to bring to mind somebody in your life or some persons in your life that made it possible for you to be where you are today. I've lost 3 very good friends in the last year, and so they're very present to me as I read. The great feminist author and editor Shirley Abbott, Arkansas writer, spent most of her life in New York, who was really seminal in breaking doors down for women in publishing. My dear friend Barry Owen and my dear friend Daryl Hudson. So I invite you to bring someone like that to our reading. I also tell my students, I ask my students, and I see some familiar names up there. It's really a delight to thank you for coming in. It's a delight to see your names. I suggest to my students that they memorize poetry as a great way of informing, enriching their writing styles, their writing. The book opens with an epigraph from the solitary and poet I'm talking about, the latest book, At the Center of All Beauty, Solitude in the Creative Life. It opens with an epigraph from the solitary poet Frank O'Hara, who died at 40 on the beach under circumstances still mysterious at Fire Island in New York. I can only quote a couple of lines in the book, but I'll say the entirety of the poem here. The poem is Autobiographia Literaria, or literary autobiography, applicable in some way, I suspect, to all of us. The poem is, when I was a child, I played by myself, all alone in the corner of the schoolyard. I hated dolls and I hated games. Animals were not friendly. Birds flew away. If anyone came looking for me, I cried out, I am an orphan. I hid behind a tree and cried out, I am an orphan. And now here I am, the center of all beauty, writing these poems. Imagine. And I love that little poem for a lot of reasons, but one of them is that last line, which the most obvious interpretation is, of course, imagine how great it is that I came from that lonely childhood to this place, the center of all beauty, writing these poems. But there's another interpretation which I want to bring to our attention, which is that it is a command, it's an imperative. You imagine, with an exclamation point, because imagination is the key. Our dreams begin in imagination. And if we're to have dreams about a better life, a better society, they begin in our imaginations, which is why it's so important what we do in this program and what we're doing today. I'm going to read a little bit. The book is a book about solitude. It begins in environmental and spiritual, I would say, concerns, because it seemed to me that the addressing of our challenges in this society are essentially philosophical and spiritual questions at their root. The individual gestures that we make, the legislation, the demonstrations, whatever happen in the public world, but the private world is where, in the imagination, is where these began. And that was a motivation behind writing the book. The book profiles 11 or 12 principal solitaries, ranging from Paul Cezanne and Walt Whitman, Emily Dickinson, to Nina Simone, Zora Neale Hurston, the great Bengali writer Rabindranath Tagore, the first non-white person to receive a Nobel Prize in 1913. It profiles them, their work, their influence on my life, and then concludes with a summary chapter. Like a lot of my books, there's a kind of a braid or a weave of memoir and research, and sometimes conversations with people that I have about the issue that I'm looking at hand. I recommend that weave or braid approach. I like to think that, although it's as old as creative nonfiction itself, which is as old as literature, nonetheless, it enjoyed a renaissance beginning in the middle 1980s, and I'd like to think that I was one of the people who helped bring that about. Let me read a couple of paragraphs from the book, and then I'll wind up with a word or two about where it's going in the future. So this is very early on in the book. We're in the midst of a demographic revolution whose long-term implications may be as significant as the 20th century's mass migration from the countryside to the city. I speak of the astonishing numbers of people worldwide who are choosing to live alone or who deliberately carve out periods of solitude from otherwise conventionally coupled lives. The evidence is accumulating that when people, especially women, are presented with the opportunity and the means to live alone, many will sacrifice to seize it. That the number of solitaries is growing worldwide is without question, but we have made little acknowledgement and accommodation of that fact. Our housing, healthcare, and urban planning, everything from restaurant design to discount gym memberships to the gargantuan loaves of bread that our bakeries turn out, is still based on the ideal of the coupled household, preferably with 2 children. Of greatest consequence, the stories we tell ourselves, that's where we come into the picture, the stories we tell ourselves embody fantasies of idealized couples and families, even if in unconventional configurations, instead of the rich and rewarding solitary journeys more and more of us are living out. Some see in this development a sign of social breakdown. I look at this demographic transformation and see not the crumbling of the cornerstone of society, but the potential for more diverse and loving relationships to one another and our planet. With 7.5 billion plus people on the earth, surely solitaries, especially those who are childless or who adopt, offer alternative stories worth our attention and support. Perhaps some deep wisdom is manifesting itself in these millions of people seeking or at least experiencing solitude. Perhaps solitaries are evidence of an aspect of the human character only now permitted to blossom. If one subscribes to the Western conception of progress, that it is possible to study our past, learn from it, and apply those lessons to build a better future, maybe studying the works and lives of our solitaries is key to reconceiving our understanding of the human family. And now at the very end of the book, there's a long meditation on friendship as the most important of human relationships at the end of the book. In my brave new world, we celebrate friendship as the queen of virtues, recognized as the foundation for all worthy human connection, including most particularly marriage. We create storylines other than that of the familiar fortress household, wherein each carefully plotted and spaced house reproduces the nation state in miniature, us inside versus them outside. We open ourselves to love in all of its manifestations. We eliminate hierarchies of love. The parent's love of the child, the dog's love of its master, the walker's love of the path, the reader's love of the word in print, the child's love of everything, the son's love of his mother, the daughter's love of her father, the love of friends, and above all, the love of self, the heresy of self-love. I seat them all at the great round table at the feast of love, a table that grows larger as more people come to sit, a meal that never exhausts itself, a table where there is room, yes there is, for those who are married. If my dream strikes you as utopian, deluded, grandiose, I point to the great failure of politicians to provide a vision sufficiently grand to counter the call to unrestrained consumption trotted out before us every hour of every day in every popular medium. My vision is no more fantastic than colonies on Mars, solar grids in space, heat transfer from the oceans, impregnable vaults for nuclear waste, carbon dioxide storage under the Great Plains, or any of hundreds of proposals our politicians and research institutions and media take seriously. It requires no trillion-dollar investment in technology, which history teaches us will inevitably generate problems equal or greater than those it solves. Merton writes of solitude, Thomas Merton, the Trappist solitary and mystic, writes of solitaries that we are, quote, a mute witness, a secret and even invisible expression of love, which takes the form of our own option for solitude in preference to the acceptance of social fictions, end quote. And what love are we solitaries mute witnesses to? The omnipresence of the great alone, the infinite possibilities of no duality, no separation between you and me, between the speaker and the spoken to, the dancer and his dance, the writer and her reader, people and our earth. So this is the cover of the book, reversed, I guess, in the mysterious way of cameras. The nice news is that I think Norton is going to do a nice relaunch for the paperback in next March, because the book's done pretty well. So that'll be good. Thank you all. Thanks again to the Spalding people for making this possible. Keep up the good work, and I really, 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 really hope that we see each other in person in November.
Thank you, Vinton. Thanks for sharing all that. It's so interesting to me. It seems such an important book now for those of us who are stuck in our homes by ourselves, or those of us who are stuck in our homes with the same person or two we've been with for a while. So well, everyone can get something from your book. So everyone try to pick that up for Fenton. So our last reader, but not our least, is our wonderful Elaine Neil Orr, who's been a wonderful teacher for us and has been with us for many years, and a great favorite of students. They love working with her. She's extremely generous with all of her mentors and in workshop and all. So Elaine is the critically acclaimed author of 5 books, including the memoir, Gods of Noonday, A White Girl's African Life, which is just a very special book to me. It was one of the few books that I agreed to review, and I've just loved it ever since I first read it. And the novel, A Different Sun, which is also wonderful. Her latest novel, Swimming Between Worlds, captures the moral imperatives of integration in the early 1960s. Her shorter work appears in Blackbird, the Missouri Review, Southern Cultures and Image, among many other places. She's been honored by the National Endowment for the Humanities, the North Carolina Arts Council, the Virginia Center for the Creative Arts, and the Raleigh Fine Arts Society. In addition to teaching here with us at the Spalding School of Writing, she serves on the faculty of English at North Carolina State University. And we're so glad that she's with us tonight, and can't wait to hear what you're going to share with us, Elaine. Really look forward to it.
Thank you, Kathleen. Okay, it's alarming to see myself enlarged. Thank you all so much for being here this evening and for sticking around. I think this is a wonderful venue for us to be together. It feels like we really are together. And the reason it feels like that is because the Spalding community has always valued and emphasized the community as much or more than anything. I've never been part of a learning and professional community that is as nourishing and as stimulating and challenging as the Spalding writing program. I've been with it since 2003, and it's been one of the great joys of my life. The faculty astound me always. I feel that I am so enriched by the faculty, and the students just impress me over and over every semester that I mentor. So I'm really happy to be here tonight. I'm going to do what I shouldn't do and read from my work in progress, which is a new novel, currently titled The Brown Museum. I think it reflects one of the emphases of Spalding, because it's focused on art, and in particular, a particular sculpture. And as you can hear, if the title is The Brown Museum, there's a museum in the book. So there are 2 timelines. It's a mother-daughter plot. One timeline is occurring in Raleigh, North Carolina in around 2015. The other is occurring in northern Nigeria, in the Sahel region in the early 60s. I'm going to start at the beginning. I don't think you need to know anything else with the daughter's story, but the daughter is now in her 50s. Okay? Okay. Raleigh, North Carolina, 2015. Catherine. The slender limbs of the crepe myrtles at her property's edge seemed to waver, and something about their nakedness, the way the limbs held the gray sky and bark curled away at the base, held her mind in suspension. Only when the dog barked did she understand the doorbell had rung. Who could that be the day after Christmas? Catherine was still in her house robe. She hoped whoever it was would go away. Another ring. A delivery man in a brown uniform stood next to the large package he had set on her porch. This one requires a signature. She took the clipboard and pen, both cold to her fingers. There, he said, and there, pointing to the lines she was to sign on. Do you want me to bring it in? It's cumbersome. I'll manage, thank you. Icy air passed through her house robe, and she recalled the crepe myrtles and their arms full of gray. The man hurried down the stairs and into his truck. At first, Catherine tried pulling the package in, but it was difficult against the concrete, so she got behind it and pushed. The package had enough tape around it to survive a hurricane, and the return address was a New York City gallery. She would like to be at the Met today with a friend, touring the galleries, stopping for lunch, tucking in time with a current exhibition. Such days left her exhausted and full. If the weather was going to be this cold, she might as well be in New York rather than Raleigh. 10 degrees projected high today. Catherine was adept at opening packages. She was the curator of African art at the North Carolina Museum. A few slashes with a box cutter, and she had the top off. White styrofoam peanuts greeted her. She plunged her hands in, and the peanuts overflowed, streaming out with an electric current that caused them to stick to the rug and her house robe, even her hair. She tried to wave the styrofoam away, but it just clung in different groupings and expanded its claim on the foyer. The dog barked at it. Another box was set in the first, but it was too awkward to lift out. Catherine slashed downward at the corners of the heavy cardboard until it opened like a peculiar lotus blossom and white peanuts spilled by the hundreds. Standing at the center of this mess was a tall, rectangular wooden box assembled with screws. It seemed like a small monolith rising out of the ground. Catherine reached out to touch it and her hand shook. Maybe she needed to eat. After 2 cups of black coffee, she felt edgy. Her last meal had been crackers with cheddar cheese and avocado last evening. She made toast and ate it standing. When a cramp started in the arch of her foot, she tried walking it off. The package must be a late Christmas gift, but from whom? A package for the museum would not be delivered to her home. She paused by the window with the bird feeder just beyond. A cardinal and several juncos jockeyed for position. 2 mourning doves bobbed along the ground. She walked down the hallway and back several more times before stopping at the arched entrance of the foyer. It looked as if a snow had poured in. The phone rang, and she let it go to voicemail. Catherine, Nash here. I hope you aren't going in today, but if you are, call me. Otherwise, I'll see you tomorrow. A white silence and a click. Why hadn't she answered? Nash was her favorite colleague. Why did she avoid connections? The question was as old as she. She had connected with her daughter, of course, perhaps too closely. But her marriage hadn't lasted, and now her daughter hardly called. Open the box. Did she think that? Did someone say it? She rummaged in her pantry for a set of small screwdrivers and was more careful this time, like a fine carpenter disassembling a jewelry box. When she lifted the lid, she found another density of white, this time shredded paper. The dog, Jack, had been leery of the white peanuts that stuck to his fur, but he snatched at the paper entrails and shook them for the kill. What a bother you are, Catherine said, but she only half meant it. At last, her hands reached the hardness of an object. She laid the box sideways, and Jack came close to sniff, then retreated several feet and sat. Catherine used both hands to bring the thing out, swaddled at last in paper. Jack perked his ears up before lowering his head between his paws. Catherine began to unwind the paper. When she caught a glimpse of the irregular brown speckled surface, she stopped and let the object rest in her lap. Once, long ago, she was on a ship. She had a doll baby. She could remember sitting with it in her lap and talking to it. That was the whole memory. Jack yapped, impatient. Okay, okay. Catherine unwound the remainder of the paper. For a moment, she stared in disbelief. She didn't hear a sound. She heard the suspension of sound and held her own breath, finally releasing a loud exhale. A few moments later, she heard the heater kick in and the house breathed again, the slight buzz of energy created by electric lights, the movement of air, the slight shift of paper. In Catherine's lap lay a terracotta figure of a man from the Sahel region of Nigeria. One leg was broken beneath the knee. He looked like a seated Jesus, a Buddha. Desert, dunes, untraveled by her. He was probably 2,000 years old. Catherine knew because she had sought a figure very like it for the museum. The culture that created this terracotta had disappeared by 300 AD. All of the figures that had been made, and there were thousands, had been ritually broken for whatever it was they were meant to do. But no one knew why. A cresting wave began in her chest, and she put a hand to her heart.
Very beautiful. Feel honored to be able to hear it in these early stages. It's lovely. Okay, so how about all the readers come back on mic, unmute your microphones. And I guess, Lynnell, I'll start with you. I'll ask you to talk about what you asked me to talk about.
Okay.
And, just for a few minutes, it would be great to hear from all of you. How are you sustaining yourself? What are you doing in order to make work? Maybe it's not an issue with you at all, but I know so many people, creative people, are struggling right now to come back to their work. And I said at the last, when Lynnell was asking me this, I mean, I feel not completely human unless I'm working in some creative way. And so things feel exacerbated. So Lynnell, how are you working these days?
Yeah, the short answer is I'm not. So yeah, it has been, I think just lack of rhythm during the day. I do know that I love a good project. So I started a project, my husband and I started a project of excavating and cleaning out and recovering a 175-year-old graveyard on my dad's farm. And so that was a lot of really good, like physically hard work, stacking the stones and digging out headstones. And then, you know, that led me back into some of the kind of research I had done for this Great Green Valley. And so actually now I've kind of started getting some more materials from the Filson, the local historical archives, about who's buried there and what they did and who they were. And what's been interesting is that the graveyard is not very populated. And it looks like the household was basically shut down with cholera, and a husband and a wife die within 2 days of each other, as well as another person in the family, as well as some other people on the death records that are all died the same week in mid-August. So that's prompted some writing, one short piece that I got published as part of a pandemic dispatch, and I'm enjoying getting back into that research. So that's been good. But it started out with a lot of shovels and pickaxes, and actually my dad got involved and used a tractor. So that'll get you going.
Well, you know, I love an old graveyard. So
yes, that's right. That's right. I'll send you the pictures.
Okay. I think I've sort of gotten myself working that way sometimes too, thinking about a project rather than one poem and writing toward that. Even as a poet, you know, it feels like I'm have some momentum then. So that's been a little helpful. What about you, Doug? How are your poems going?
The writing has been good. So much of my writing routine is couched in journaling. So these are very fruitful. I guess that might not be the best word choice, but yeah, these are times to journal. I think, you know, since we've come to California, I've been participating in protests less. We've only participated in the car protests here. The numbers are just getting so crazy. I risked it a lot in Arizona, but you know, that's when it was June and all the passion around it was so much. But yeah, no, other than that, I've just been trying to figure out what my role is and the best way that I can be of purpose during the struggle. And I think, or the Great Black Revolution, I would more aptly like to say. And yeah, so I've been more trying to figure out that, and that kind of seems more important than my writing. But I have just been journaling. So I guess my tip to people who are having trouble writing is like letting go of expectations of like sitting at the keyboard and saying, I'm going to get this polished product out, and get more to just like spending time with your thoughts through the journaling process. I've been doing that, and it's been very helpful for me.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic advice. You know, not to necessarily even think that it's kind of the opposite of what I was just saying about writing toward a project, but really not expecting too much, but just writing. I mean, it's the purest kind of form of writing in some ways, right? To not have any expectations about it. So, what about you, Fenton? How are you doing?
Well, before answering, Katie inspired me to try out my Eudora Welty, my fan from the Eudora Welty house in Jackson, Mississippi. I saw her fanning, and I picked this up 20 years ago, I guess. So you can visit there and get a Eudora Welty fan and be a fan of Eudora Welty. You know, I echo what Doug is saying. It's a big time of a big transition for me. So it's been easy to, in one way, having a book that just came out means that it's kind of easy to say, okay, this is a time of cleaning out files. These things are really necessary for a writer to look back at back correspondence, to be kind to oneself about what it is. It was interesting to hear from Lynnell that that physical labor led to inspiration. I think there's a real strong connection. I know there is between the corporeal and the intellectual and spiritual. So getting out and doing those kinds of projects with trusting, having the faith that those will ultimately come to fruition in some way that I cannot predict at the time, that I can't know right now. So, you know, my main thing is just, you know, to be kind to yourself and not have unrealistic expectations, to take a lot of notes, because it is a really strange time. I've contacted my nieces and nephews, a lot of the younger people in my life, and I just to say, you know, I just want you to know, because you don't really have a context, but if this time feels really strange, it is really strange. I don't know anything in my life other than maybe 68 to 74 that was as crazy and as fraught as this time. But out of fraught comes, we'd like to think, some kind of edging forward. So it's an exciting time, and take lots of notes. And Doug, I'll send you an essay that I wrote about a club that I grew up with in rural Kentucky called Club 68, which was where all the Black performers at the time performed, because it was the manager was the only club owner who would allow Black people to come in, and consequently, it's a lot of fun. I really, really enjoy listening to you read.
Yeah.
Oh, no, thank you. And I enjoyed hearing your work as well. And you being an AZ, you know, I went to ASU, and as soon as I got to Arizona State and hung out in Tucson for 1 second, I realized that I should have went to U of A. So yeah, you go to you're from the cooler place. Like, I was in Tucson for 1 second, and I was like, oh yeah, we made the wrong choice. But no, I would love to hear about that. But I think I've heard about that club a little bit from the poet Mitchell Douglas, who lives in Indianapolis. He's from Louisville as well.
Okay, well, I would
yeah, and he's
love
talked
to
up,
know.
but I still want to read it.
Yeah, I'd love to know anything anybody else has written about it. I thought I was the only person, but I'll send it to you.
Oh, he was just giving me history of Louisville when I told him I was going to be working over there. But yeah, no, I can't wait to read it. Honestly, if it's anything as strong as the work you read tonight, I know it's going to punch me in the chest and change me. So thank you. Please send it.
Yeah.
I'll put my email in the chat.
Yeah, I think for some people, I don't know, especially if you don't have a lot of projects behind you, or you're just beginning to write seriously, you may not trust that in these periods of kind of being fallow that the work will come back again. So I think that's a really great reminder, Fenton, that just because you're not writing right now, that doesn't mean you will never ever write again. So right, you will, you sure will. So Elaine, you must have a number of projects going, Elaine. That
I'll talk about this summer. I do have a couple of book projects, but I actually, so I'll just start by saying, many of you know that I'm immunosuppressed. And so I've had to be really, really cautious since March, and I have been at home or in my yard most of the time. And I don't know, the dam just broke, and I've been writing furiously, except really just quite happily. I had begun this novel, and I had gotten to page 80 about 4 times, and I couldn't get past page 80. And I realized that what I needed to do was write the backstory out. And when I wrote the backstory, it became, I thought, well, this is just going to be the whole novel. I don't even need the front story. But then I thought, but wait, I really want that woman in her 50s. So I'm not going to get rid of the front story. But the backstory was just, it was like I got on a horse and it just took off out of the gate and I couldn't stop. And so it's been an incredibly productive summer, but I have not really written for at least 2 years when my last novel came out. And so between teaching and promoting that novel, I hadn't had a big chunk of time. And if you're writing a novel you really need a big chunk of time.
Mm-hmm.
Journal a great deal. I write in this big black journal all the time. And no one else could make any sense out of it but me, of what I'm doing there. So it's really been a very, in terms of my writing, it's been very joyful. Of course, there's an incredible disconnect between, I mean, not just not disconnect, but what would be a good metaphor or image for it? I can't think of it right now, but what's going on in our world, right? The pandemic and the Black Lives Matter movement and all the things that have propelled us to this moment are when I go back into that world, it's like I'm moving through some kind of a whirlwind. So one thing I meant to say about my novel and much of what has prompted it is prompting it is the question of who owns African art and where does it belong? And so, you know, this piece of art is coming, 2,000-year-old piece of art is showing up on a doorstep in North Carolina. And that's something I'm trying to figure out in the novel.
Oh, we can't wait.
Yeah, it's
Wait to hear more.
I have to agree, if you don't write for a while, you will write at some point, because we are all writers and we need to write. It's what we're called to do.
Yeah, it is. Sometimes you have to fill back up, I think.
Right.
And if you haven't lived that a couple of times, you don't necessarily trust that it's going to lead to anything. So what I'd like to do now is invite everyone to turn on their cameras so that our readers can see who's out in the audience here. There's Bonita. There's Eleanor. Yay.
Yay.
You don't have to if you don't want to, but it would be great to see you right now. So, and then, fantastic. Hey, Clint. Hey, Angie. Angie is the best writer of thank you notes. I love getting thank you notes. They're really great. Hey, Betty. Hey.
Oh.
Hey, Brian. It's so good to see you. Oh my gosh, this is fantastic. I feel like you're in my living room. This is the next best thing. It's just great. So, hey, Michelle. Great. Okay, so if you want to take off your microphone, you're mute right now. We'll give a big round of applause. We'll risk all kinds of dissonance, audio dissonance, to do it. So okay. Thank you all so much. It was a really wonderful reading. It was so great to be with you and to hear all the beautiful things that you had to say. They were just inspiring and will help us. So with that, I'll tell you that we're going to have another reading on August 4th. And so far we know that Maggie Smith is going to read, Lamar Giles is going to read, and Kira Obolensky is going to read. So we know that so far, and we'll send out word of that, and so we'll hope that we'll all be back together again. And then we just want to thank Katie Yoko, who's amazing, who did all the stage direction. Thank you. All right, so I will hang around now, and if anybody wants to talk to me about the program or what's going to happen in the fall, I'm happy to do that. Or if you're ready to scoot off to dinner or get your kids in bed or whatever. Thank you, Elaine. Thank you, Lynnell. Thank you, Fenton. Thank you, Doug. It was so great to be with you. So have a wonderful evening, and thanks for joining us, everyone.